We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. That to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. The Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. Hollow Promises. History is often told through a singular lens, relegating important players to the margins. Their stories are untold and almost forgotten. The first Africans were brought to North America over 400 years ago. With the law of the land often against them, they toiled, persevered, and survived the harshest of circumstances. Their lives were filled with defeats and triumphs. In New York City, the term half-free was introduced, giving blacks a semi-freedom when the West India Company began granting freedom to company slaves. These men were given plots of land to farm so that they could provide enough to feed themselves and their families. Despite their new status and land ownership, these men were still slaves. Widely used, the designation half-free was because their freedom was not absolute. They were required to give a number of crops and animals from their farmland back to the colony each year. The West India Company reserved the right to call them into service at any time, although they would be paid for the work. Their status was not automatically passed down to their children, who instead remained the property of the West India Company. These men could purchase the freedom of their loved ones, provided they could afford it. While half-free was only half a life, it too was fleeting. During the British colonial period, blacks were forced by financial and legal circumstances to sell their property. By the late 1720s, all the former land grants were owned by whites. Charleston, June 1822. A carpenter named Denmark Vesey, who purchased his freedom at the age of 32, was tried and executed for plotting a slave revolt. By many accounts, the revolt was said to involve thousands. Allegedly holding meetings in secret at the AME church that he helped to found, Vesey was arrested on June 22 before the rising could begin. Despite torture and the threat of execution, Vesey refused to give up his followers. He was executed on July 2nd. In the aftermath of the trial, the African church which Vesey was affiliated with was burned down, and authorities passed a series of laws further restricting the rights of Charleston slaves. In New Orleans, where 2 in every 50 blacks were free, the runaway slave notices in the New Orleans Daily Picayune were not just notices of missing property, but markers for points of flight. They served as a record of a moment in time and space when an enslaved person took action to free their body from bondage. A slave could sneak across town and pass as a free person of color. The French Quarter still operated like a village where people knew who belonged to whom. But outside of the French Quarter, in the 2nd District, referred to locally as the land of foreigners, a slave could vanish and earn a wage. Hollow Promises is a documentary series focused on the experiences of those enslaved in urban areas throughout the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries and their impact on the abolition of the institution of slavery in the United States. The series aims to highlight the ways in which enslaved and formerly enslaved persons shaped the cities in which they lived. These were the people who helped the abolition movement gain its foothold by making their way as determined Black people in these cities, building careers and lives for themselves and their families. They were promised so much and given so little. As the laws changed, becoming more restrictive with each generation, Black enslaved persons continued to fight, working to secure a better life for the next generation.